I read, or I think you said something in a previous seminar that your understanding or your initial definition of fictional positioning was much different than it's come to mean.
Right. Uh-huh.
And that was one thing I wanted to talk about, was that I kind of liked when I think that I heard it through something with D. Vincent Baker about like...
He's really worked that term hard. And I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to ask for clarification because I like the definition he uses it for. It helped me to understand some things, but I was also very curious to understand like kind of where it came from and what you feel the differences are between your initial intentions and current usage.
The original intentions on my part was to talk specifically about components, playable components, usable components of a character. So it was perhaps, I think it was a very focused task that I had in mind. And as you know, I have talked about the effectiveness of characters. I've talked about their resources. And then positioning was relevant information about the character relative to other fictional things.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, Homeland. In a fantasy game with a big map on the first 2 pages, Homeland of the character. And we go and we find out that the character's reputation is X, Y, or Z based on that homeland. Or we find that that it feeds into other things. Now, one of the points about those 3 categories is that many times a given game mechanic will straddle them or make the one turn into the other. So, for example, if people from this homeland get a plus in their intelligence, for example. So all of a sudden you have fictional positioning in which you also have this increase in effectiveness. And that's okay. It just means both of those got jumped up by using that one word in the process of character creation. And one of my biggest points about these things was how you had it's kind of like the homunculus. Somebody talked about, a guy named Ivan talked about the homunculus in terms of different versions of D&D that formed at different tables. And you both would claim that you loved D&D and you loved the game and you thought you were culturally the same because you played D&D and stood up for it against the indie bastards and all that stuff. And then you went and looked at what this guy was playing and you're like, my God, it's, look at those horribly huge feet. And he looks at yours and says, but he has nothing to stand on. He's only got little feet. And what did you do to his head? And so this is kind of the same idea, that in a given role-playing game, we may find a great deal of effort is put in terms of effectiveness. All these different skills and all their different levels, all these different weapons and all their different kinds of damage, all this stuff over in effectiveness, all these nuances. And then when you look at your characters as a gestalt based on all of those things, and you say, oh, wow, my guy is very clearly positioned as a very ruthless dude, very rough and tough. I'm going to make him an outlaw. I'm looking at all these things that I bought. I'm looking at all these things that he's got. Maybe I rolled for some, whatever. But I've got them, and looking at them, I've got this guy socially positioned in my mind now.
Gotcha.
And so the point is that often they will determine things about the others, or in many ways by buying that assassin's knife you bought for the dude.
Right.
You were actually buying stuff over there as well as an effectiveness score.
Gotcha.
So that's why I was thinking, and you couldn't have bought it, you couldn't have got that any other way. There was no other mechanism in the game. You never rolled on the social positioning table to find out that he was an outlaw. So what I'm saying is that currency, the abstract currency with which everything in the game is bought, often is mighty subtle across these three different things. And so any number of people will tell you that they hate having any kind of birth tables. They hate any kind of specification of the character's appearance. They hate anything to do with personality mechanics whatsoever, because they are accustomed to buying those things through the choices that they make for resources and effectiveness.
Gotcha.
And that's the currency exchange that they like. They don't want another kind of currency exchange at work. And so then, of course, that person might play a game where you roll for all that stuff, and being an outlaw comes with that kind of knife. And they're kind of like, that's funny, it works the other way. Who knew? Which is why I like to think of it as currency exchange. You can put the effort and the quantification into a couple of them, and it will turn into a point exchange over in another one a lot of the time. Or things that, well, if I'm going to use this particular kind of sword or axe, it's going to cost me these many, endurance points, so I better beef up my resources. So anyway, it's kind of the positioning therefore was very specific to the role, the fictional role and identity and relative position of the character to situations and to other characters. I think the term ultimately started being used much more situationally, like whether the character was higher on stairs or something like that. Was that
as
correct?
I understood it, and I might be totally wrong about it, it seemed to be about linking what happened in the fiction to what you were choosing mechanically, like
right,
in the various Powered by the Apocalypse games. It'd be like, when you do this thing in the fiction, then follow this procedure. Right. So instead of saying I hit the guy, it would be try to overpower somebody or whatever.
Right. Well, the interesting thing to me is, I don't want to be too critical about this, but I can never sometimes tell. Never sometimes. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. I'll tell you what my reading of the text of Apocalypse World is, and I'm pretty sure I'm just quoting it. Mm-hmm. That it works either way. Either you point to a move and you want to do that mechanical move.
Right.
And as needed, fill in the fictionalization of it so that everybody else understands it fictionally.
Right.
Or you are in the thick of things just blurting out what the character says and does, and somebody, maybe you or maybe someone else, says, oh, that's that move. We better roll.
Right.
And that Vincent is saying both work. Both are cool. It's awesome. Play. And don't stress over which one you do, because it works either way. Now, that's what the text of Apocalypse World tells me. What the dialogue at Anyway tells me seems to be different. Mm. And there's voluminous texts and often heartfelt argument about this at Anyway. And so, therefore, I've not delved into it in a scholarly fashion. Mm. But my take is that I don't see why one or the other is supposed to be causal of the other. Mm. And yet, for some reason, the dialogues there seemed to assume that you had to choose, or that you cared about one versus the other.
I think I've even read some
never could grasp why that side-taking emerged out of text that, to me, was extremely clear. You don't have to take sides. Even you, a single person, will find yourself hitting from either side at multiple different times. Cool. Just go with it. The game is robust.
Right.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that I even read a Powered by the Apocalypse game that did explicitly take a side, saying, like, you never say the move you're going to take. It might have been Dungeon World, saying you never say the move you're going to take, you say what you do, and then the dungeon master tells you when you're making a move. That might be partially because you get XP for making moves.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, it's not hard. I mean, if you add to it the fact that a custom move, I mean, again, going to classic Apocalypse World, that custom moves on the fly are highly encouraged.
Right.
That if you really do something that genuinely you cannot figure out which move would be your role, you just made up a new move. Write it down. Nobody's hurting.
Yeah.
For you to do that. You didn't gain an advantage in the game or anything like that. It just made sense to do that. And so I have always found that discussion, fiction first, mechanics first, that kind of thing, to be grossly overblown and unnecessary. And my joke, actually, because in my mind, the sort of archetypal arguers in a dichotomous way about this were Vincent himself with fiction first, and Ralph Mazza with mechanics first. And each one only seemed to be arguing in order to annoy the other. In other words, neither of them would have taken that strong a position unless they felt like, locking horns about it. And the reason I say that is that I've played numerous games with both of them.
Right.
They both do both. They just do. So, I looking at the dialogues and going, are you two is this like some massive Poe on the rest of us? I mean, but why are we talking about this? So anyway, that's kind of why I always wince about the whole positioning thing. Because I was really just talking about a feature of every role-playing game. Sorry, every role-playing character consists of explicit or implicit resources, effectiveness, and positioning relative for that character. And again, sometimes it's implicit. I mean, there are games with no fatigue scores, no resource scores of certain things, but in play, there end up being such things. In one fashion or another. So anyway, I'm often interested in ways knowledge within or between those categories turns into more specific knowledge in the course of play. Excellent. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot.
And I will talk to you later on.